Hi, this is Catherine, and this is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Lemon Lavender Lane from Celestial Seasonings, which I quite like. And I drink a lot on this channel. I return to it very often. But I also picked it because it has the word lane in it, and we are walking down memory lane for me a little bit. Or at least trying not to stumble, because a lot of my memory has gone out the window. I have a weird thing where I have either a freakishly good memory about certain things, and then other things just leave me. And one of my problems is that there are books that I've read that I loved and will recommend to the skies, but I cannot remember a lot of details. I can't always remember character names. I can't remember exactly what happened in the plot, and maybe not even the ending. And that's sad, because I hate that I haven't retained every book I read. But I mean, I do read a lot, so I guess a lot of things will fall by the wayside. So this makes me want to reread certain books when I know that I enjoyed the book so much, and I want to just go over it again. But there's a problem. Number one, there's no time in the day to to reread, and number two, there's no time in the day. See, I'm repeating myself, but that's the thing. It really is that. It's not. There are books that I reread over and over and over again, but I can't do that with every book that I'm going to recommend here. So I'm just going to show them to you, and the reason why I'm showing these to you is because these are Victorian books. These are books written in the Victorian Britain time and place. And so this is October, so I thought, let me just narrow it down to these books. But there are so many more. And these are not even, this is not exhaustive. I tried to just pick a maximum of 2 of the authors that I've picked. So there may be some that I liked anyway, but are just not here. And there's some that I just don't have on me. So I just figured they can wait. Like Thomas Hardy's Far from the Madding Crowd. I remember I really liked that book, and but I don't have it on me. So that's kind of an honorable mention here. So let's get started. I know you guys know that I like mystery novels, but when it comes to Sherlock Holmes, I do tend to prefer his shorter stories, because I don't know, there's just something about that way of telling his stories that works for me anyway. But yeah, and I've struggled to finish some of his books. The Valley of Fear I haven't finished. I haven't finished. I don't think I finished Study in Scarlet. Both of these have something in common. They veer off into some tale in America that just doesn't hold me. I mean, I'm not saying I don't like American books. Just in this context, I didn't really care. Yeah, I liked Hound of the Baskervilles, though, quite a lot. But I like The Sign of the Four. And I would like to reread this. And this one I'm not as desperate to reread because I remember a lot about it. Maybe it's because I have read it more than once. Or I don't know if it's like I read it solidly or just go back to it and skim a lot. Maybe it's because it's short, so it's easy to do that. I don't know. Also because I've seen the adaptation with Jeremy Brett, and they're pretty faithful. I'm not saying exact, but they're pretty faithful they're pretty faithful to the story. So I mean, they do leave out a few things, but that's fine. So I think that's why it has stayed in my head quite well, but I still wouldn't mind curling up with this again. It's been a number of years. This is one of my more recent reads. When I say more recent, I mean, because the cutoff is 5 years. I haven't read any of these books in the past 5 years. So it's probably been about 8 years since I read this book, but I can't remember exactly. And this is probably not the volume I read. I probably read the library book and liked it so much that I got this pretty volume. And that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Now, I like to say that I don't really like books that are too dark in their tone, but I do read murder mysteries, so whatever. But this is such a strange story, but legendary. And what really gets me through this book is his witty way of writing, because it's not necessarily a comedy, but Oscar Wilde, he wrote poems too, but he wrote a lot of plays, and I think that is one of his strengths is dialogue, even if it's just so quippy, you know what I mean? But I just love it. So it starts out very much like that, and then it gets a little darker and a little bit, stranger, but it's great. It's and this is a great time of year, this kind of weather and everything. days getting shorter. It's just a wonderful time to read this book. If I would have had a reread prompt for Victober, I probably would have chosen this one. But alas. But anyway, I could always read it another month. And now we're coming to Elizabeth Gaskell, whose books that I read so far I've quite liked. I liked Cranford and wouldn't mind reading that again, but I'm not, it was, you ever have a book that you like, oh, this is a nice, cozy, enjoyable book, but you're not like, oh, I can't wait to read this again. But I really loved Wives and Daughters when I read it, approximately 2010. I could be wrong, but approximately around then. And maybe 2011. I don't know. I got this volume from Book Off. So it's one of my Book Off memories. Back before I was going crazy in Book Off and I would just buy 1 or 2 books occasionally. Anyway, I know it's supposed to be unfinished, but it feels pretty complete. There's this woman or girl, young lady, who lives with her father, who is a doctor. I think he is a doctor. Yes. and then they have a nice little life, and then he marries a woman who, she and her daughter, they just pretty much upend everything in their own way. In some ways, I can't say it's a horror or anything like that. It's just a change of life, and then the stepsisters, of course, find themselves in a slight rivalry, and I just remember it was a cozy book, but it's a big chunky book. This one is like close to 600 pages, but it didn't feel like it went on and on. And I'm not that big into pink, but I really like this volume. Anyway, now I'm still reading 10 to Wildfell Hall. I don't know why it's taking me so long to finish. I think sometimes I get a little bit not a fan of gaslighting-ish feelings, not a fan of alcoholism. So, I don't mind it a little bit in a side story, but it's a little bit heavy on the alcoholism. So maybe that's just a struggle for me, personally. But I know it's fantastic, but it's not my first in Brontë, and it's Agnes Grey, which I read a number of years ago. Can't remember exactly when, but probably around 2000. Probably again in the. There are certain chunks of my life that were more classically, aimed. And first it was like the mid 90s, like around from 93 to 96 ish, and then there was approximately a little time in, I would say, the mid-aughts. And then, now, again, past couple of years. So, like 2000 and, I don't know, because I read a few classics, probably 2000, 2003, but mostly around 2007, 8, 9, that kind of time, 10, 11. So I get it jumbled up a bit. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so around that time I read Agnes Grey, and I remember really liking it, and now it's out of my head. Like, I don't remember what happened. I know there was, okay, so, she's a governess. Yes, I did have the feeling of governess. It's one of the governess Brontë books. But that's about it, and I feel that I really need to reread it because I know I liked it, and why don't I remember it? So that's one of the reasons why I want to reread it, just because I know that the experience was a good one, but why is my brain not retaining it? Now, here's a writer that I've gotten back into once again, can't recommend enough, and that is Anthony Trollope. And this is The Way We Live Now, which is well loved. And it's about a number of characters. There's a man who comes into town who is kind of like a rich kind of businessman, but he's a bit of a scammy swindler type too. You know what I mean? Like, get involved with investments that might end up going terribly wrong. And just how his relationship with society is, and his daughter, and a man who I think is trying to marry her because he's a gold digger, and I think it's his mother who's a writer as well, which was kind of a reflection on Anthony Trollope's mother. So it was a great story, some interesting people, a lot of not likable characters, but it doesn't make the story any worse. And I quite liked it, even though it had its ups and downs, like tragedies and whatever. But it felt very modern, even though some things that happened weren't very modern, but it felt that way. So I just absolutely loved it, and I wanna reread it. In case you didn't realize that I'm talking about rereading things. Now we're gonna get into Charles Dickens, which is such a weird experience for me. He is probably, I could be wrong, but of all the Victorian writers, I think he's my first. I may have read a few poems by a few Victorian poets before him, but it was approximately 6th grade, when I was about 11-ish, that my class read Christmas Carol. And I remember it being an interesting story, and I knew a lot of, I'd seen a lot of adaptations. You can't escape it, but I tried to read, I think it was Hard Times back in like 1995, because I had a copy at home. Still haven't finished it. And then I was trying to get back to classics again, and I finally really started reading Charles Dickens. I don't remember the exact year, probably around 2007, 2008. And that there were a few years there that were just solid. Every year I read a few Charles Dickens, and it was a habit. I would read other books, but I was always having a Dickens in there somewhere. And then I don't know what happened. I read so many good ones and some iffy ones. Like I still don't like Oliver Twist very much, but I just stopped, and I feel kind of sad about that. So I've been struggling in recent years because I've tried some reads with my sister, buddy reads, and I couldn't get through the old Curiosity Shop. I don't know if I ever will. And I started Dombey and Son in December, and I do intend to finish it. But these two are the reasons why I want to keep going with Dickens, really. And that is Our Mutual Friend and Bleak House. I think I prefer Bleak House ever so slightly, but Our Mutual Friend was highly enjoyable, different, I guess, fortunes made, inheritances, but people turning up dead, but are they dead? So yeah, sudden turns of sorry, my fingers are placed oddly. Turns of people's lives and ups and downs, and some really strong female characters in here, and it was rather legendary to me. But now I'm forgetting so much of what happened, even though I absolutely love this book. So I want to reread it. This is definitely one of the top ones I want to reread. But and this one I want to reread, but I remember a lot more of it for some reason. Bleak House, Jarndyce and Jarndyce. This whole legal problem, really, where an estate gets into all kinds of paperwork and almost like litigation. I don't know if that's the right word. Yeah. So the interminable case of Jarndyce and Jarndyce. So it just keeps going on, and there are wards of the court who are involved in it, and then there are people that they're acquainted with that somehow become involved in it. There are, strange births, like people who mysterious people who are related that don't know it. And there is an investigation that is very much a detective story, that is actually a part of this story that is, to me, pretty amazing, because this is early days, again, like why I'm wanting to read The Moonstone, because it's the early days of detective novels whatsoever. So, and there is this is terrible. There is a spontaneous combustion, which I had heard about before I read it, and I was waiting and waiting for it, and it was finally when I was on the subway on a weekend day, I think, that I actually came across that. I think I was going to some Jacob Javits Center event back when I used to do stuff like that, which is a big, by the way, that's a big event space that has a lot of different shows. They've had some kind of book cons there. They've had Comic Cons of New York there. Anyway, so whatever I was doing at the time, I think that's when I came across the spontaneous combustion. I think there's a cat in the story too, and there's like a poor boy that's pathetic, and terrible people and sympathetic characters, and one of Dickens' best. So I would just love to read it, even though I remember lots of it. I also would like to be reminded of what I forgot. The last two are by a writer that I quite like, one of my earliest Victorian writers after Charles Dickens, which is George Eliot. And I read Adam Bede, and I read Silas Marner and The Mill on the Floss around 93, 94. And I like them, but I don't feel an absolute need to return to them. Like if I were in some kind of book club or buddy read where, where that was the book being considered, I might read it and say, hey, this was good. I forgot that it was good. But they didn't stick with me much. Whereas, Daniel Deronda I read not too long ago, probably 2014. So, which for me is not that long ago. And it is a lot about, Daniel Deronda, looking into his background. So you get brought into like the Jewish community in London and elsewhere, and so it's a different kind of society feeling than a lot of Victorian books. Not that it wasn't included in other Victorian books, but it's specifically here. George Eliot just really knows how to write that kind of story. But so I would like to read Daniel Deronda again. But I really would like to read, did I say read or write? But anyway, Middlemarch. This book I actually purchased on my first trip to London in 1994, but I didn't start reading it until 98, and then I kind of left off because I wasn't doing a lot of reading back then. Really wasn't. Late 90s. Bad. But anyway, but at least I had a bit of a social life, so I guess you have to do something when you're young, they say. And then I picked it up probably, oh goodness, I don't remember the exact year. I want to say 2012? I could be wrong. I could be off by any number of years. Really need to look into the years. I have old journals, but I just haven't looked into them recently. But there's a lot of, again, very society related. This takes place a little earlier than Victorian times. It talks about the first Reform Bill. So it's a lot about different groups of people who are fighting for their rights and all the change that's happening at the time, modernizing as it were. But it's really focused on two different marriages that are both basically just messes. But the two characters that get into the Dorothea Brooke stands out more than anything. Have all kinds of ups and downs, and you really do root for them to come through with varying results. But yeah, I want to go back to Middlemarch. I don't remember it being a particularly enjoyable story as far as like happy, but it wasn't like the Thomas Hardy brand of absolutely tragic that is in most of his books. So that's the thing with George Eliot. It's like I feel like because I started reading both of those writers around the same time, I mixed them up in a weird way, even though they're completely different writers. But they both do have a lot of sad-ish stories. But for some reason, George Eliot, even though it can get sad, there's always a bit of hope as well. I don't know. So anyway, that's it. Those are the books. There are more, but I'm not going to go on all night. I mean, there's Wilkie Collins' Woman in White. More Dickens, like Great Expectations, absolutely loved. David Copperfield's pretty good. And then there's, not to mention, the French classics, but we're talking about Victorian. So anyway, let me know if you guys have read any of these books and if you want to return to them more than anything. Let me know what books you have been meaning to get back to and maybe have forgotten a lot about, but remember how you felt when you read them, where you were, whatever. And time is just getting in the way. So that's all for this little discussion. This is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day, and book-filled day, and book-filled day, because I'm repeating myself. Bye.